Have you heard people say that there are no essential carbohydrates? I'm sort of playing with that word essential as if that means you don't need them or they aren't beneficial. Well, the word essential in nutrition science means something very different from the term essential as we use it in everyday language. The term essential is very specific. And so there are a number of essential nutrients, which are, include minerals and vitamins, but for the sake of what we're talking about here, let's stick to macros. So they often follow that up by saying there are essential fats and there are essential proteins, but there are no essential carbohydrates, again. So let's talk about what essential means and what those essential fats and proteins are, for starters. And so the term essential in nutrition space means one, your body cannot make it endogenously, cannot make it within itself from other resources, and that they are needed for survival, to not die. Okay. So what are the essential fats? The essential fats are actually linoleic and linoleic acids. So the omega-6 and the omega-3 fatty acids. Okay. Which are polyunsaturated fats. You need about 1 to 2 grams of the omega-3s in a day and approximately 4 to 8-ish grams of the omega-6, which are essential in the day. So at most, you need about 10 grams of polyunsaturated fat, which are essential, considered essential. Anything beyond that is not considered essential. Monounsaturated fat and saturated fat are not essential. Are they beneficial? Are they helpful? Is there a need for them in the body? Is there a use for them in the body? Absolutely. Would you benefit from having more than 10 grams? Yes. But they're not essential. The essential ones are the omega-6 and omega-3, 1 to 2 grams of omega-3, 4 to 8 grams of omega-6. Okay, now let's get to the essential amino acids or essential proteins. There are 9 essential amino acids. Now, there's far more amino acids than that in the body and that the body uses for a variety of things. Everything from tissue repair, hormone production. I mean, there's so many uses for amino acids and proteins, right? But there's only 9 amino acids that are considered essential, and the grand total of those 9 that you need in a day adds up to right around 13 grams of total protein for a day, which are considered essential. Again, these are the term essential nutrition is a very specific meaning. Not would it benefit for you to have more or to have others in your body? That's not really the question. Essential is what's needed for survival and how much. 13 grams in total of all 9 amino acids combined. Now, like, saturated fat, beneficial, monounsaturated fat, we can make saturated and monounsaturated from the polyunsaturated, right? We can make saturated fat from polyunsaturated fats. We can make monounsaturated from saturated fats. And with the amino acids, our body uses those 9 essential amino acids to make other proteins, which are beneficial and helpful and optimal. Now, is glucose in those terms, in that framework, considered essential? No, because our body can break down protein and use lactate, which is a byproduct of glucose metabolism, and use glycerol, which is a small molecule that holds 3 fatty acids together to make a triglyceride. When we break down fat, that glycerol molecule breaks off and contributes a small amount under normal circumstances to gluconeogenesis, which is the process of making glucose, right? Generally, it's mostly coming from lactate and protein, depending on what's available. So, and in a very low carb state, a lot of it's coming from protein. And of course, with diabetics, diabetics are heavily have a lot of gluconeogenesis going on, even more so than someone on a zero carb diet, making glucose. That's why they can wake up after not eating for 8 or 10 hours first thing in the morning to extremely high glucose levels. Is because gluconeogenesis is breaking down the protein from their muscle, skin, and bone to make glucose. And that's what's happening in a low carb diet. You're breaking down protein. Unless you've just eaten, you'll use some protein from what you've just eaten. But between meals, or if or what else is needed in addition to what you've eaten, it's coming from muscle, skin, and bone to make that glucose, because glucose is so important. Glucose is important and vital and needed and optimal because your body is willing to break down such expensive tissue as muscle, skin, and bone in order to make sure glucose is available, because you're using it all the time. Even if you're eating glucose in your meals, between meals, gluconeogenesis is happening to a small degree to keep blood sugar stable, or if there's a big physical demand or stress demand on your body and more glucose is needed to manage that physical or emotional stress of whatever kind it is, it will make more glucose in the liver, right? The gluconeogenesis and some to some degree in the kidney will make more glucose for that stressful response. Will upregulate that. But in general, between meals, it's making glucose to a small degree all the time to keep your blood sugar stable between, say, 65 and 85 milligrams per deciliter, which is considered normal blood sugar. Some low carb or no carb individuals, and I've been there, I've seen this in my own blood work when I was eating more low carb and doing a lot of intermittent fasting. Intermittent fasting can increase gluconeogenesis as well. Fasted workouts, which I was also doing, can elevate blood sugar by stimulating more gluconeogenesis. So your fasted blood sugar can be in the 90s, or I've seen some people even in the hundreds. Fasted blood sugar at 100, 105, 106, right in there, with high A1C levels, which is another indication of high blood sugar, on a no-carb diet or a very low-carb diet, because gluconeogenesis is elevated in order to make more glucose. Their body is using more glucose than they are eating. So to enough of a degree that the glucose production is not only ramped up, but there's tissues in the body that are saying, hey, we're not going to use that glucose, so we can spare it for the brain. So, like, for instance, they'll say the muscles won't uptake as much glucose, so that there's more of that glucose that it's making from breaking down muscle, skin, and bone available for the brain and other tissues, which absolutely have to have glucose. There are just certain cells that move so fast, that need energy so quickly, that glucose is the only thing that really works. There's certain brain cells, certain tissue in the kidneys, red blood cells, which don't burn fat at all, right? They don't use oxygen at all. They don't have mitochondria. So all your red blood cells just burn glucose. So, and then I think in the testes for men, and in the eyes, there's certain tissues that just need glucose all the time. So glucose is very necessary. It's very beneficial. And when we look at the elite athletes, right, the best high-performing athletes, they're all eating a lot of glucose. That's the majority of their energy and of their total calories in the day is coming from glucose. So in that sense, glucose is very beneficial, and it's so important that your body's willing to break down lean mass to make it. So this confusion over whether something is essential is really irrelevant. The term essential, whether something is an essential nutrient, is really irrelevant to whether or not it's beneficial or even important or very needed to be just operating at a functional level, without creating a lot of stress. Because in fact, part of that gluconeogenesis, that elevated gluconeogenesis, comes with elevated cortisol, glucagon, and adrenaline, which of course are stress hormones. And what I ran into was kind of hitting a wall of stress where I was interrupting my sleep. I wasn't recovering. So I had some personal experience with low carb really causing me to overtrain and underfuel, and elevating my stress hormones way, way too much. And I found a lot of improvement in my sleep and in my stress markers in my blood work and even my thyroid, because low carb can actually interfere with thyroid conversion from T4 to T3 over time. It may not right at the beginning, but as your body adapts to it, that's what we see. We see textbook interruption in thyroid conversion, elevated stress hormones, interrupted sleep, and many other side effects. You can look up side effects of low energy availability, LEA, or REDS, relative energy deficiency in sport, which is seen in a lot of athletes, all related to low calorie and low carb diets. So for reference for what I'm talking about with the term essential in nutrition, and I've included some studies to show this, to demonstrate this, the use of this terminology in this way in the captions. So feel free to check those out. Now, the people using this term, I don't know if it's out of, ignorance, possibly, in the actual, meaning of the word essential in dietary aspect. Because, they're not dietarily essential, but are they beneficial or necessary for your physiology? Absolutely. There's a lot of nutrients which are not considered essential, which are beneficial and necessary for your physiology to function properly. Those two things don't mean the same thing. So whether that's, again, out of ignorance, or some people maybe out of just a way of trying to influence people into agreeing with them, or following what they're trying to get people to do with their diet. That's not for me to judge on an individual basis. I'm sure there's a little bit of both out there, not in the same person, but out there, right? A bit of ignorance and a bit of manipulation, and using the term knowing that most people don't understand the meaning of the word because they're not familiar with nutrition science. So again, check out the links in the caption and reconsider if this is something you're saying. You might want to be a little more careful with the terms that you're using to make sure you're using them properly